Okay, well, we continue to see people joining, but in the interest of time, we will go ahead and get this presentation started. Thank you all for joining us today on this presentation on CMMC. Yes, it is here, and we're going to give you all an opportunity to talk to an expert in the field that can give some insight as to what you need to be doing now, what you need to be preparing for if you are going to be participating and continue to participate in DoD contracts, and really some insights as to how best to do that in the most cost-effective manner. So, Mike, if we want to just share the agenda briefly. We're going to do some introductions. We'll talk a little bit about how do I know if I need to be level 2 compliant and we'll have to get certified. Keep in mind there's a couple of indications that some level 2s can be self-assessed and some will have to go through the certification process. Mike will shed some light on what that means for you and what you really should be preparing for. Talk about some challenges and gaps that have been identified with folks who have been preparing for this process and how you as an organization can best address those, the kind of evidence and documentation you're going to need to have in place, and really some best practices for preparing your organization for this process. And then how you can utilize some tools to help continuously monitor this, because once you're in it, it's not a one and done. You'll need to update, you'll need to make sure that things have not changed in your environment, and you'll need to regularly reattest that you're meeting these requirements. So I'm Tom Leahy. I am the VP of Sales and Business Development with SureShield. Our presenter today is Mike Crandall. Mike is the CEO of Digital Beachhead. Mike can give a little bit of his background. Digital Beachhead is a C3PAO authorized organization and can take you through that process, as well as you know, C3PAOs can also help you prepare for this process as well. The only thing they can't do is do both.
Right.
So, Mike, maybe you can give a brief introduction to yourself and the company, and then we'll go ahead and get the session started. A couple of things. First of all, for everyone here, you will receive copies of this presentation, as well as access to the webinar itself. We intend to make this a very hopefully interactive session, so please go to the Q&A section and bring your questions in. We will, of course, answer those as we go along. We've already got a few questions here now that we will bring up as we move into the presentation. We will also have a couple of polls to take where you can provide some information around where you're at in the process now, as well as opportunities to get some assistance if needed. And so with that, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you, and we'll go ahead and get the session started.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, a little about me. I'm a Air Force retiree, doing 21 years basically in the cybersecurity world. Now CEO, co-founder of Digital Beachhead. We've been providing virtual CISO services, helping people get ready for CMMC. And then just recently, we had gone through our own DIBCAC, and now we're an authorized C3PO, so we can provide the assessments to your organizations as you get ready for CMMC.
Mike,
So,
first question. I mean, and maybe
yeah,
getting to it right now. Do you really believe this is here? We've had
no, that's a great question, Tom. Uh, CMMC is here. The biggest indicator of that is the newly hired CIO for the Department of Defense is Miss Katie Harrington, and she was the uh, CISO for the Chief Information Security Officer for the DoD when CMMC was created. So this is kind of her brainchild, and so now she's got the top job, not the supporting cybersecurity job, and the thing she's been saying is, everyone's worried about Doge and cuts. Well, CMMC was doing and looking for abuse prior to there even being an office of Doge. Because the whole point of CMMC is making sure that these organizations that have been saying they are cyber secure are actually cyber secure. So yeah, I see it's here. It's going to stay. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And this little timeline is showing, where we are now and how we got to the implementation. Um, the only thing we're awaiting, as you see on that third bullet, is the 48 CFR ruling, which basically integrates CMMC into the DoD contracts and RFPs, and that should be coming out any month now. They expect it in quarter 2, so within the next 3 months. And what that means effectively is now we're seeing it slowly come into some RFPs as in the future. But once 48 CFR is passed, it will be a requirement. No more will it or won't it. It will have to. So you will start seeing it by quarter 3, which is really when all our RFPs tend to drop, right? Towards the end of the year.
No, they should expect in any new RFPs that are coming out or solicitations that this is going to be a requirement in there, in a specification around that requirement, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The DFARS clause 7021 is going to be written into all of those solicitations. And in fact, we're aware of the Army MAPS contract right now saying that while you don't have to be level 2 certified to be on the solicitation, you have to be on a C3PO's books. So you have to be scheduled for an assessment in order for you to bid on the Army MAPS contract. So it's definitely here. But what does that mean to you all? It it's the CMMC program's established. That was the Title 32 that went through. And then we're waiting on again Title 48, which is the thing that'll mandate it go in. There's 2 types of data that you have to be concerned with. The FCI, which is your CMMC Level 1 certification, those will all be self-assessments. And then if you have controlled unclassified information, the CUI, that'll be CMMC Level 2. And right now there's a mix. They're bifurcating it to some self-assessments and some requiring the third party C3POs. And we're going to explain exactly what that means. So will my organization need CMMC Level 2? So in a recent memo dated 17 January, the Office of the Secretary of Defense said that level 2 is required when CUI will be processed, stored, or transmitted on contractor-owned information systems and the performance of a DoD contract and flow downs to subcontractors or other contractual instruments. So if you will be dealing with CUI, you will need to meet level 2. The contract, the solicitation should clearly state that you will be handling CUI. Now to the bifurcation. Level 2 self-assessment is limited to the requirement for CUI if is sufficient only for when CUI outside of the National Archives CUI register Defense Organizational Index grouping. And we're going to explain exactly what that means in a minute. But if you are outside of the DoD, in layman's terms, if you do not handle DoD CUI, you can self-attest. However, if you are dealing with CUI within the defense registry, you will have to be assessed by a third party organization. This bifurcation, previously, people were thinking that they were going to get away with the self assessments, because they were talking about this bifurcation and we didn't know who would and who wouldn't. Well, with this memo, it's pretty clear that if you are handling DoD controlled unclassified information, DoD CUI, you will have to be third party assessed, which adds a lot more folks to the queue than previously was expected.
So Mike, let me stop you there just for a second. We're going to take a
Yeah,
brief poll. Obviously, prior to all this coming out, anyone that was participating in contracts were supposed to be NIST 800-171 self assessed, right? And submit that
correct.
data in an SSP. obviously this came into place because there were some issues with, as you were mentioning, with the new director or the VP coming in. There were issues of that assessment maybe being presented and not fully being properly validated. Um, Obviously, anyone that's in this process right now should have done this. And if not, I mean, they really should get that portion in place. As folks know, the 800-171 assessment is really the same as CMMC level 2.
Correct.
But we're just going to take a brief poll of the audience to ask them, have they completed one of these already? And if so, have they updated it? So I'm going to just launch that poll quickly. For those of you who are on, please go ahead and answer the questions. We'll give you just a minute or so to do that. Uh,
Yeah, you should have done your self-assessment. You should have had an SPRS score. Um, the thing with the current self-assessments is you could create yourself a program of actions and milestones, a POAM, so you weren't having to score a perfect 110. That's what really changes when we hit CMMC.
So some interesting results, and maybe some of this is because some of our participants actually haven't participated in DoD contracts. I'm hoping that's the case. About 50% of the audience has indicated they've done an assessment, which is good, and submitted an SSP, but close to 50% have not. So if you are certainly a contractor already and you haven't, you should get on that very, very quickly. And if you're considering, you're going to have to do this. And then most, good portion of these have not updated their assessment as well. So you might want to speak to, as we move along, the importance of making sure they have some of those things in line before they get into the process of submitting to have a CMMC assessment done.
Absolutely, because it's critical that you know where you are before you bring in a 3CPO.
Yeah.
So this is to go into what is your National Archive CUI registry for defense organizations. So in the defense group of CUI, they have these titles, these types of CUI. So you have controlled technical information, you have DoD critical infrastructure security information, the naval nuclear propulsion information, privileged safety information, and unclassified controlled nuclear information for defense. So you look at that and you think, well, what one would apply to me? What kind of CUI would I get? I will say 90%, unless you are specifically in those other areas from your organization. Most DoD contractors fall under the CTI, the Controlled Technical Information, and they have examples include research and engineering data, engineering drawings, associated lists, specifications, standards, process sheets, manuals, tech reports, tech orders, catalog item identification. So if you have the government has a catalog of items that you provide, that catalog would be CUI, certain data sets, studies, and analysis. So, and then related information in computer software, executable code, and source code. Um, if it has any technical reference whatsoever, the DoD will label it CUI under the technical controlled technical information format. So this is where we're believing that a great majority of people who handle CT or handle CUI for the DoD will fall under that CTI, and you will be required to have that third party assessment.
So those numbers, originally, there was some thought that perhaps there would be almost like a 50-50 distribution, and really, most likely, it's going to be much higher than that. And most organizations that are considered to be dealing with CUI are going to have to go through a third-party assessment.
Absolutely, and it's dealing with the fact that they assumed they were going to be that 50-50. When they said bifurcate, they really meant bias, and they thought it was going to be 50-50. But it's really turned out that the slim minority will be dealing with outside of DoD CUI type information. So that'll be the move forward
So
is
let
going
me,
to be
I've
for
got a
more
quick
people.
question here.
Yep.
It probably points to why we had some saying no, that they hadn't done the assessments. This particular organization says they're not currently a DoD provider, but they do a lot of business with the VA. And they've read that the VA may be requiring CMMC for some contracts in now or in the future. Do you have any information on those requirements?
Yes. So the VA is a close partner to the DoD, and they deal with a lot of existing military members that are transitioning, as well as us veterans. So there may be contracts that maintain DoD data that could be DoD CUI, and the VA may require. Um, if you're bidding through the VA, you aren't currently under DFARS, you'll be under FARS. But the Title 48 is basically bringing in the DoD, so the DFARS clause. We have heard that there is a rule coming through that's going to add CMMC to the FARS clause. So all departments will be pushing towards CMMC. The difference is whether you have to be third party or whether you can still self-attest. So right now with the VA, you may still be able to self-attest to your CMMC readiness, but I would say be prepared. It's not just coming to the VA, it's going to come to all the departments in the years ahead.
Great. And as we get into this next part of the presentation, as I mentioned to the group, and as they know, Digital Beachhead is now a C3PAO authorized organization, but you guys have been doing a lot of C3PAOs can act similarly to an RPO, meaning they can help organizations get prepared for this. You've done a lot of these types of assessments with companies, and I think you're going to get into what are some of the common challenges and gaps you're seeing as you've been doing this over time.
Absolutely. Yes, Tom. So, as Tom said, we've been acting as a virtual Chief Information Security Officer, our VCSO offering, where we have been helping Department of Defense contracting companies get ready for CMMC. So, we've been playing in this space for about 4 years now. And these are the most common challenges, the gaps we see, and I've broken them out by the 14 different control families. So under access control, what we find is understanding who has access with what permissions or privileges. A lot of organizations know they have users, but they haven't really segmented them. Who has privileged access? Who has local privilege access? So it's really know thyself, know who your users are, being able to identify them in writing, not just I can go to my Active Directory and look at my group, so you have to be able to show it beyond just the technical. So that's one of the biggest things through all of these is having your written policies, procedures, and those kind of things set up. For awareness and training, documentation. Um, for those that are doing online training with an online training source like Symbol or KnowBe4, you kind of can have this covered because they manage that training for you. You can see who's taking it, who's lacking, those kind of things. But for those of us that did the once a year death by PowerPoint, the whole workforce comes in or gets a slide sent to them. Just sending it out isn't enough. You have to make sure that the people have attended the training, you have documented when they took the training, those kind of things. So that's of critical importance. A big one, audit and accountability. Uh, where our audit logs are kept. A lot of small businesses struggle with this one because we haven't brought in a SIEM, which is like a log analyzer, a log collector, because we're a small organization. So that's an expense we maybe haven't thought of. But it's not just your endpoints, but it's your cloud, it's your routers and switches, anything you have in your environment. We need to be collecting those logs, and it's a lot easier to collect them centrally than have to do it individually. So there's a lot of gaps around that. In configuration management, there is a big lack of a formal process for change. Small businesses tend to think, well, we don't change often, But during our assessment, what we discovered is we actually change every month at a minimum because you're getting new patches. You're updating your systems. So as you're updating the systems, you have changed versions on any number of your software products. Well, that's a change. What formal process did you go through to approve and do a security check on those changes? Identification and authentication. The administrators, a lot of small businesses, they just have their account, and that account has administrative privileges. But per CMMC and the NIST 800-171, for your day-to-day operations, checking your email, surfing the web, you should be doing it with a user level privilege and then up your privilege level either per action or by logging out and logging in with a new account that has administrative privileges. So we've seen that a lot. Incident response, the biggest thing here is having a formal plan, not just when things go bad, IT takes care of it, but a formal plan in place that shows the who, what, why, and when. And then to follow that up, have you practiced it? Have you done a tabletop? Even if those teams we found had some sort of incident response, very rarely have they done and documented, again, documented is important, the tabletop of the exercise. Maintenance, remote maintenance access. So when we have Dell or HP come in for warranty work and they remote into our computers, how are we tracking that? How are we approving that? Is there two-factor authentication in that process? So maintenance was something of us old IT guys that we used to do, dusting things off, taking covers off. It's not really what people do as we've moved to the cloud, but there's still maintenance to be done. So we have to document it and have a process. Moving to media protection, removable media. If you allow any kind of USB removable media, are they properly labeled? Do you know who has them? Do we know what data is on them? Are they encrypted? Or are you blocking it? Are you blocking all but a few? These things just need to be documented. If you're not getting the major theme here, which is document everything.
Mhm.
Your physical protection, document authorized access. So this is the tough one. We pretty much document visitor access, but how are we documenting day-to-day access? So if you are not in an office, you're a small business and you don't have a badge reader, how are you documenting who comes in every day? That could be done with a security camera, as long as the security camera logs date and time of entry. But we found that that's the biggest gap is we are not tracking the authorized people comings and goings.
Hmm.
With your personnel security, making sure a background check and having the evidence you did it. Again, documentation. Did we just look online and go, yep, Tom looks great, he's hired? Or did you print it out, store it somewhere, or is it stored online, but you have some evidence that you've done some sort of background check? Your risk assessments, having a documented risk assessment. Have you sat down and prioritized what you feel your greatest risks are from ransomware, fire, flood, famine? What are the risks to your organization and to your IT infrastructure? Again, a lot of people talk about risk, but they haven't documented it. They have no formal plan.
So Mike, though, as a C3PAO, you'll be looking to see if they've done this, right? And look for the
Exactly.
documentation of it. Mhm.
Exactly, Tom. So as part of the 3CPAO, there's the 110 controls and 320 objectives. We will look to see that you have answered all 320 objectives. And these are just some of the pain points we've seen where a lot of people would not pass based on what we're seeing in initial reviews and assessments and things we've done helping people get ready. So number 12, the 12th control family is security assessments. A lot of small businesses aren't doing vulnerability scans. They have anti-malware, maybe some endpoint protections, but they're not running a scheduled vulnerability scan. So some of that software can be expensive, but you definitely want to either hire someone to do a vulnerability scan. SureShield has this as an option that they can run a vulnerability scan on your network. So there are tools out there, and not all of them are expensive, but you have to make sure you've put something into place. And then system and communications protections. Um, a lot of small businesses are using that Xfinity or Verizon provided business router. It is somewhat of a firewall, but it isn't really in your purview to control. So you have no boundary protection where you can set up access control lists, block traffic, allow traffic. So a lot of small businesses are realizing they need to put something like that in place. Again, an added expense, another device that you might have to purchase. Um, but it's you have to be able to document that data flow control. How are you blocking data from leaving? And then the last control, systems and information integrity. So this is how do you follow up on those vulnerability scans? So what are you doing when your anti-malware pops up and says a virus was found? So this whole control is documenting those. And based on your risk assessments, you should have said we respond to critical in a day. You pick the timing, of course, but respond to critical in a day, high in a week, medium in a month, low in a quarter, or as we get to it, those kind of things. This controls is you documenting that you've done that. I got a low uh, malware pop up, so I responded to it in a week, which met my month criteria.
And Mike, it sounds like a lot of, I mean, you've reiterated this a number of times. A lot of these things, it's maybe not that they don't have it in place, they're not documenting that they have it. And not
Absolutely.
having the requisite, follow-up evidence to prove that. And that will be a big thing that they're looking for. And anything, obviously, one of the reasons that they moved away from just a self-assessment because they're going to come in and validate that you actually have the evidence to support the answer to a question or an objective.
Absolutely, Tom. And the easiest example of that is the config management. People will say, well, I have an auto update on. So, of course, my software is being updated. But are you tracking that in a baseline document? And are you tracking that the change version happened and what date? And so there's a lot of individual objectives in that control set that a small business might just feel they're doing because it was I loaded the update is
Sure.
done.
Right.
But that needs a paperwork proof. All right, if we don't have any questions on that one, again, feel free to throw out questions in the Q&A.
Please, yes.
So
So,
what
and just sorry, just as I lead in, just again, think of a company like Digital Beachhead actually had to go through what you will be going through in order to become a C3PAO. And they just, obviously last year met those, but you can go into a lot of the lessons that were learned in that process because these will apply to an OSC.
That is absolutely correct. So we know the pain you're going to have to go through, having done it ourselves. We had to answer all of the controls. So the biggest thing that we walked away from was while we knew their objectives, they didn't just want to know the answer to the practices, the controls. We needed to meet every objective underneath that control for that control to be met, for that practice to be met. So again, 110 practices, and there's 320, 321 individual objectives that have to be met. And that was what we found there was it was very difficult because we needed evidence. We had to have artifacts, documents to prove each one of those 321. So there were a lot of evidence documents. It ended up taking up a lot of space and a lot of time to create those. Your system security plan, they consider that this is the go-to Bible, if you will. This is where you go to um, list everything. So in your system security plan, you not only have to demonstrate and show that you've met all 320 objectives, you have to have system diagrams, you have to have data flow diagrams, you have to have a complete system description, you have to talk about who is authorized, what roles and responsibilities exist within your organization. So if your SSP, your system security plan now, is anything under 100 pages, you probably don't have a big enough SSP for level two. So that's just something you should consider. So some of the things it needs: an executive summary, system information, that's your system outline, a list of your authorized software, your system inventory. So um, we had to list them in our SSP. I think some 3CPOs are going to allow you to reference documents these saying our system inventory is document X. You have to have your key roles and responsibilities and the implementation status of all practices and objectives. So you have to, in your SSP, say, I have met, control one, objective A this way, control one, objective B this way. It all has to be spelled out in your SSP, as well as your policies and procedures.
So Mike, a quick question that I'm seeing. What if I'm a level one? Am I still gonna, even though I'm self-attesting, do I still have to do an SSP? I mean, what's kind of the feedback on that?
It's always good to have an SSP. They're not required for level one, um, but I would have one anyway. And the reason for that is while we're moving to CMMC, I'm expecting to see the DFARS 7012 still listed. And that says you're supposed to be working towards NIST 800-171, which is all of these controls.
Okay.
So you're probably still going to have an SPRS score. Uh, the benefit you have is if you're level one, you can self-attest to those 17 critical controls out of NIST 800-171, and you have met your basic criteria for level one. But to meet your NIST 800-171 SPRS requirements, you have the rest of the controls you got to do self-attest on, and you're just lucky you still get to keep the POAM. But in that process, you need a SSP anyway. So
And just to that self-attestment, that's gonna have to be at the highest level of the organization. So
that's
if
right.
if you're doing that, you again better and want to make sure that what you're attesting to is complete and accurate.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest hangups, and they are beginning to push the button on the False Claims Act. So any self-attestment, I would stress to make sure that it is accurate, because if there's any reason for them to question it, they are um, bringing it to court. There's been a lot of self attestations that have gone to the False Claim Act and gone to court with a lot of payouts. So all your documents need to be approved and signed. Again, as Tom is saying, that needs to come from senior management. And that includes your diagrams. People often miss this, but that diagram has to be the final approved diagram. So make sure they have signatures and dates. Your policies, procedures, and SSP, they must align and state the same thing. This is a big one. Uh, we got caught on our first go through. Our SSP and our policy said our screensaver would come on in 15 minutes, and our systems were set to 10. So while that was passing, because it was better than our SSP, they stressed we really want to see a match. So 15, 15, and 15, if you will, right? Everything matches. The biggest catch up there will be if you have your SSP and procedures and policies say something different, but definitely make sure the technical implementations match. Your config management, full and complete documentation. Um, really develop a thorough change management program. And then how do you track even the small changes? So for larger or mid-sized companies, larger small companies, you may have a ticketing system or a managed service provider that's helping you provide that with a ticketing system. You definitely want to make sure, though, that if you're small and don't have that, you are still tracking those changes somehow, spreadsheets or other. And then having documentation separated by practice helps the auditor follow. So we had everything broken out into the 14 domains. So we had policies and procedures broke out by the domains. And then we also had the evidence broken out so that they could just easily go to the right folder for the right domain and find the evidence that matched. So that evidence library, having a place where all that is kept is critical. So if you can hit an easy button to keep all your data in one spot and keep it organized, that's the thing to do. So documentation and evidence, we recommend a policy and procedure per practice. So 14 documents at a minimum. The policy is as simple as state that we shall do it. You don't have to go crazy in your policy, but your procedure is showing how you do it. So that one needs to be the detailed what you did to implement that practice, that objective. Other documents you may want to have on hand, your incident response plan, maintenance plan, a media posting plan. If everyone has a website, you have to have a plan for how you release media to your website and or social media. Config management plan, you need to have an authorized user list, a system baseline, and then your network diagrams, data flow diagrams, and a system boundary, which could be included into your network diagram. So these are all key documentation that you're going to need for an assessment. Evidence showing how each objective has been met. So for evidence, this could be a screenshot, it could be the policy, but you want to show exactly for those 321 objectives how you met it. Two-factor authentication is turned on. You can show that that's been configured either on your device or in your cloud. Coming up with a good naming convention. We were required to have the naming convention as that example, but that naming convention allows the auditor to know exactly which control and which objective you are meeting. And so that's how we were told to name it. You can find something similar. It'll help the auditor. Some evidence can cover more than one objective. We duplicated the file using the naming convention above. And while that takes up more space, it makes it a lot easier for an auditor. And if you've ever been through an audit, the easier you make it for the auditor, the easier it is for you to get through the audit. And evidence must match the policy and procedure. That's what I said earlier. We want to make sure that if it says 15 minutes for screensaver, your snapshot of your screensaver settings also shows 15 minutes. And then creating an evidence book or a repository. Having all of this in one place so you don't have to go find it somewhere in your directory structure. We created a whole directory that was just based on our CMMC audit. And again, broke it out into policies, procedures, and evidence, and created the 14 subfolders underneath to match the domain families.
And as you're advising companies now and preparing for this process, these are the kind of things that you're putting in place for them.
That
Correct?
is correct. And we are helping them create these documents. We're helping them organize, and then we partner with SureShields because they have their documentation breaks it down by objective with an ability to upload evidence that matches. So it keeps it in a single spot. Easy then for an assessor to come and see.
Great. And to this, I know you're going to talk about, again, maybe with the ecosystems, there's rumors that, they're still maybe a little behind on getting authorized C3PAOs. So there's kind of a backlog of companies now that are just so that they can get in the queue are putting themselves or getting calls to get themselves ready to get assessed by a third party. I think, as you're going to point out here, it's super important that you make sure that you have everything ready if you're going to get into that process, because if you're not, you could not pass, and two, you could be sent back to get more. It's not going to be a super inexpensive process, so you want to be ready
No,
in the beginning.
absolutely. So understanding and having your self-assessment and really knowing you have your ducks in a row is important. As Tom mentioned, currently there are 63 3 CPAOs. And then we hear different numbers of the number of companies that are going to need it, but anywhere from 50 to 150,000 DIB companies are going to require the 3CPO certification. So simple math is 63 of us can't keep up. So when you get in line, get in the queue, get your date booked, you definitely don't want to then have to wait and go back to the end of the queue to get reassessed. So make sure that your information you have, your evidence, and everything is up to snuff. So our best practices for your internal self-assessment is create an independent audit team. So either hire a third-party auditor. They don't necessarily need to be a 3CPO, but I would either say a 3CPO or grab a certified CMMC assessor, a CCA. Have someone who actually understands the ecosystem do it. If not, at least pick someone inside of your company that's not connected with the putting the pieces together. Have someone who may not understand the controls ask the questions. So that way, the people who do understand the controls will learn and get some practice for having to answer it. This is how we implemented it. This is how it meets the objective. And be critical. Don't look for the, oh, yeah, we did that. Really try to play devil's advocate and see that it's met. Um, think about anything an auditor may ask. Follow the CMMC assessment process, the CAP. That's the Bible we use. That's the document we use to go through an audit.
Can you explain that a little bit more, what that is and where someone might find that?
Yep, the CAP. I've got the CAP is located if you go to the cyberab.org. They have the CAP. The DOD also has a downloadable of the CAP. And I think on the next slide, I'm going to go through the different phases of the CAP. So we'll go through those a little more detail, but definitely something you want to follow. Um, this third bullet, very important. Make sure senior leadership is involved because they have to sign things. They're the ones who are going to have to attest to this. Because even if you get your certification from a 3CPAO, the senior leader of the organization will have to attest every year that nothing has changed, that the systems remain the same. So they should actually know what they're signing and why. And then make sure all your documents complement each other. And going back to my example, screensaver at 15, make sure all of it says 15. This is why people miss out. I see we have a question.
Uh,
Um,
you want to read it or you want me to read it to you?
go ahead, Tom.
Our organization does all the work at government bases using government equipment. We went through all the SSP self-assessment and reviewed by DCSA. I believe Mike said we must go through with an independent assessment.
So this is a great question, and it really revolves around the information you have on your corporate network. Um, I would say at least you'll have FCI and you'll need to be CMMC level 1 because you have contracts. So you stated that, but they work on basis. If all of the CUI resides in those butts and seats, people working on base, and your corporate network will not receive CUI, you can stay at level 1. However, I'm finding that a lot of contracting officers might include CUI in purchase orders or they may be a part of your actual solicitation documentation. They may, when they're telling you what kind of workers they need, or there's instructions or descriptions for the jobs that you're hiring for, that may contain CUI. And if that is on your company network, you have to store that on your company network, then you will have to, unfortunately, then go to level 2. So the what level depends on what CUI you have and where it is stored. So while most of your workers will be working CUI or higher, maybe on the government base, um, you need to see if you have any CUI, or they're going to say you might need to protect CUI in your corporate network as well. But great question. Continuous monitoring and improvement. So not only is this we need to answer these controls and have all our documents in place, but this needs to be monitored. We have to show that we're constantly keeping tabs on the controls that we do have in place. So a SEAM which is your log aggregator, your log collection device. That can set up alerts, let you know if privileged account use is be happening or happening out of scope, or a certain account is using privileged access when they shouldn't be. Having some sort of XDR, which is monitoring your endpoint for suspicious activities. Some vulnerability testing. Again, that was a big one that people missed. And then there are some things that there aren't simple controls for. Um, the the biggest one being 30 days of inactivity for users. Within Active Directory, there isn't a button or a tool you can hit that allows you to say this account hasn't been used in 30 days. So, disable it. That's something you're going to have to create a script for, a PowerShell script. So if your IT department or your IT team or your MSP doesn't know how to do that, you either have to do it manually, meaning every 30 days you got to go and check everybody's account and make sure they've logged in over the past 30 days, or find someone to help you with that. You have to be able to demonstrate how practices and objectives are monitored for that compliance. So there's certain ones that, you know, the vulnerability scans, the anti-malware scans, you have to be able to show that they're being done. That process needs to be built into your change management plan. If you're going to upgrade systems or upgrade software, you have to go through your change management plan. And if you can track and monitor objective, do it. So if it's something that you can easily say, I check this every 6 months, every quarter, do it. We recently just did our SSP review, our system security plan review. We do it biannually. So twice a year, we look at it, make sure there's no major changes to our system, and if the SSP needs to be changed or not, and then we annotate that on our SSP. And then the cap. To Tom's question, the assessment process. So steps 1 and 2 are all yourselves. This is your organization planning and preparing for the assessment. So making sure that all your evidence is in place, making sure that you know who the players are going to be. Who will we be able to ask questions of when we come in? What cloud services are you using? What security services are you using? Then pre-assess, go through that process, like I stated earlier, try to make an independent team so it's more critical in the questions they ask and the answers they expect, to really see if you're ready. The last thing I would tell you is make sure, at a minimum, you have an answer. We can't guarantee if they're right or wrong at this stage, but you have answered all of the objectives. So you have 320 answers and pieces of evidence or artifacts. Step 3 is where you contact the 3CPO. So you find the 3CPO. As Tom alluded to, we try our best to keep them reasonable, but they're definitely not what I would say inexpensive. The auditors and the requirements that a board puts on us as a 3CPO forces some of these rates. But in phase 1, all we're going to do is look at your self-assessment, your SSP, your policies, procedures, and we're not going to see if you did them right. We're just going to see that you answered them. So literally phase 1 is, did you answer the mail? Did you have the questions answered? We are hearing that a lot of companies right now are not passing even phase 1. So that's why I stress again, in your plan and prep and your pre-assess, answer the 320 questions, 321 control questions. If you've done that, you can at least say, I answered the mail. That'll get you past phase 1. If you are not ready for phase 2, the sad part is in phase 1, the assessment stops. There's a fee for assessment phase 1. You don't move into phase 2, but we have to report that. This is the big key here. If you do not make phase 1, we still report in EMAS that you did not make phase 1. So now you're in the system as being not met. So you answer the mail in phase one, you move to phase two. That's where we actually conduct the assessment. Now we move from did you answer the question to did you answer the question with some sort of sufficiency is the word we use that way. Is it a sufficient answer? Is it adequate? So we go through, we look at all your evidence, we look at all your policies and procedures. We do interviews. So we set up beforehand during the readiness and phase one. We also set up the who will be interviewed. We're going to have to talk to HR teams, marketing teams, your IT teams, maybe some leadership. But we set up the who we interview, and in phase two, we do it. And then that's where we recommend and provide daily situation reports saying if you're either trending met or trending not met for the controls. At the end of phase two, you have finalized all of our review of everything, and we move into phase three, which is where we present you with your final briefings and the overall findings. And this is where you will fall into one of three categories. You will either have met all of the controls and objectives, and you will obtain final certification, meaning you are now CMMC level 2. There are a very small number of what we refer to as the 1 point. If you know from your SPRS score, all of the controls are weighted with a point system of 1 to 5. If you have not met or were trending not met for any of those 1 point, no more than 20 of them, because you have to score at least an 88. So if you have those, we can come back in 180 days and reassess. At that point, you get a conditional certification. You're conditionally certified, and within 180 days, we come back and we will re-review just those controls that you were trending not met.
But I think the statement here is really, if even if you're going to start this process, get everything in place. I mean, make sure you're comfortable and have it in place because you really don't want to have someone having to come back. Having that conditional is not going to be as beneficial to you, and it just is going to add more time and labor and work and potential cost.
Absolutely, because coming back would be an additional fee because we have to come back and reassess. It'll be much less because it's just based on the controls you had or were trending not met. But the worst option in phase three is just a not met.
Yeah.
Um, you had a control that was not a 1 pointer that could go to a program of action and milestones, a POAM. It was a 5 pointer, and therefore you just effectively failed the assessment and you have to start the entire process again. So that's why I like having these webinars and talking about it because we want people to be ready. We don't want to get you partway through and then realize you didn't meet something. So phase four is the closeout. That's where we upload everything into EMAS and or come back for your conditional and do the reassessment. Um, so phase four is where everything becomes final and you get your certificate in hand because we do have a formal certificate from the Cyber AB we send you, and the number will come from EMAS, your certification number, and then that will get moved into SPRS for you, and you will be certified.
And I think it's important to also note that you see it as a circle because this will be a continuous process. Even when you go through this, every year you're going to have to attest that you continue to meet these requirements. You'll need to reevaluate. And if you are someone that's gone through it, you'll have to do it again every 3 years. So best to have some tools in place that can help you continually manage that process as well. I know we're getting close to the end of the time here, Mike. Maybe we could go to the next slide, but briefly, um, uh, first of all, if there's any other questions that folks have, please ask them. If you are interested in actually having, as you can see, obviously the folks from Digital Beachhead have a lot of expertise in this, both from doing it currently today and really helping folks get prepared in the future. If you're interested in having them contact you for some further information and a free consultation and how they might help you, please go ahead and indicate so in the poll here. But let me get to one other question. How early do you see? I guess people today could actually start going through this process, correct, Mike?
Correct. We're taking bookings now, and we've got bookings going out already to January 2026. We have availability, but that's how far out people are booking us.
Okay, so we're seeing a lot of folks now. If you're not if you don't feel your company's ready, all I would say is encourage you is to find someone that can help you. If you have your own resources in-house, obviously get to that and start looking at all those controls and objectives and begin that process because it will be fairly complex.
Absolutely. And to this slide, the path to cyber begins with a conversation. So reach out to somebody and start that conversation today to help yourselves get ready. And then, Tom, this is what SureShield can do for you. They have a great set of tools that we use.
Yeah, and it's particularly we have a number of solutions that can help in the process, as Mike mentioned, the vulnerability scanning piece, if you don't have that in place. But there is a platform that actually Digital Beachhead uses for helping their clients gather all this information, and we can assist with you in that process as well. So I still have the poll open. Appreciate anyone that's still on there going ahead and answering into that poll.
Oh, we got a question from John. He says, as a subcontractor, does it make sense to work through this with the contractor? John, it depends, sadly. I would say yes if they're willing to help you. If they just give it to you as a flow down, they may just expect you to take care of it. Um, but if they can help you with it, that would be fantastic. But I know a lot of the prime contractors are just flowing it down and kind of leaving it to you to figure out the best way to get it done.
That's been a common that we've seen is the primes are actually putting it in their contracts now with their subs that you need to have this in place, right?
Absolutely.
They're not necessarily going to provide the assistance with that. They're just going to have the expectation that you have that in place.
Any other questions? Because we're here to answer them. And if you can't get them now, feel free to hit us up, and we can uh, answer them via email or online. You can find us on LinkedIn, both Tom and I on LinkedIn.
I'm not seeing any others. As I mentioned to the folks, you will get a communication from us with access to this content as well as to the webinar. And then certainly reach out to us if you have any issues or you need further assistance. For those of you that answered yes, you'll be contacted by folks from Digital Beachhead. Uh, Others, please just keep up to date and we'll continue to update you on any new developments that happen in this area. So thank you all for your time. We're on top of the hour now and appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today.
Appreciate everyone coming out.